So welcome to Lunchtime with a Librarian. My name is Mary Bear Shannon. I am a reference librarian at the Haverford Township Free Library. And we have been doing this program for a number of months so that we can help you get to know the staff and the board and the people who work so hard for our library, for the Haverford Township Free Library. And today I'm really excited to have Jim Brown, one of our Board of Trustees, here for our program. Jim, welcome, and thank you for being here.
I'm delighted to be here.
So Jim, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am a 73-year-old, married for 51 years guy who was a fourth-generation Californian a long time ago, and have dotted about. Before moving to this area in 2014, I had been in Iowa for 25 years as a faculty member and academic administrator. We moved here because we wanted to be participatory grandparents, and our daughter's family with 3 kids lives in the area. So.
And what did you teach? What was your subject?
I'm an experimental psychologist. I taught developmental psychology and biopsychology.
And then didn't you end your career as a college president?
Yes, at Cornell College, the last college I worked at, I had the record for the greatest number of positions held. Yes, I was the interim president for a year when we were between people, but then I had been the interim academic dean. 3 times I was interim vice president for business. I chaired the music department and the theater department. IT reported to me 3 different times. I managed athletics for a year. I mean, it was one of those.
Wow.
I like making things work, and when they needed somebody to make things work, that's what I did.
And now you're helping to make the library work, so we're glad for that.
It's one of the main attractions of being on the board at this library. So I'm on the personnel committee and the finance committee, and before the township had to stop working on remodeling the current facility, I chaired a planning committee. I mean, a library as good as ours doesn't just happen. There are a zillion little pieces that have to fit together. And I like helping put all those pieces together to make it work. It's one of the things I've done all my life, and this has been a great experience for me.
So would you say that's your favorite thing about being on the board, is continuing that love of yours to make things work?
I would say that. It's sometimes putting the pieces together is harder than other times. And for this particular library, the staff is at this particular time really great. And so the amount of time one has to spend to put out little brush fires and find solutions to problems and stuff like that is pretty minimal, because the library staff is already figuring those things out and already either doing or proposing things to be done. And so the amount of supervision the board is doing right now is pretty minor. The biggest issues right now, of course, are the physical facility, and it's totally inadequate for the quality and amount of service our library provides. And so how it is we're going to improve the facility and what we're going to do with the library while we are improving the facility is the task which is showing up in front of us now.
To continue to serve our community that, from my guess, really loves us dearly and would miss us, I think.
That's right.
So you've been in the Havertown, Philadelphia area for a little while. Did you do anything before you came to the library here in the community, other than being Poppy?
Yes, just being Poppy. Other than fixing up a 70-something-year-old house, of which we are only the second owners, I and getting to know the community. I served on the Human Relations Commission for the township. I had for all sorts of reasons, I had applied to be on the board of trustees, and the township chose somebody else instead. And so they asked me, would I like to serve on the Human Relations Commission? And I've done that kind of work before, and I said, absolutely. And it was a good experience. But when this slot came up, I immediately said, oh, but I'd really like to be on the library board. So I moved.
Sounds like you have a soft spot in your heart for libraries.
I do. I was an early reader and was always a book guy, even from young ages. I mean, I was reading books at 5 and 6, and I mean kid books. But I would sometimes get up from the dinner table to go to the bathroom and then just not show back up to dinner because I would find a book and start reading. And then, of course, later, going through school and becoming an academic, I understood much more about libraries from a research perspective, the breadth of what the services they provide, the kind of reference stuff they provide, the government documents they provide. And increasingly, librarians aren't simply print people. They're electronic people, they're database search people. It's become a much broader kind of niche that libraries fill. And I've seen a lot of them. The last college I worked at, the college library was also the town's library. And so in addition to the kind of traditional academic library, we had a huge children's room, and we provided access for community members to use the computers to get out on things, issues of privacy and what kinds of sites one could access from the library, where academic people and township people had different sorts of interests and how to manage that. And I worked with the library a lot. It was fun. It was a challenge, but to see the library thrive and serve people, that was great.
It's an interesting combination to have an academic library also serve as the town library. I think of my own college library, and if I had come across a story time, I think my mind would have been blown as a college student. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was great to have kids between 5 and 15 inhabiting the college library. I mean, it made it a real community. It was fun.
Yeah, that's great. So you talked about leaving the dinner table and going to read and then not reappearing at dinner. What were some of the books that you read growing up?
Well, I started, I think, with sort of traditional stuff. The Thornton Burgess books were big when I was a kid. These were all stories about forest and meadows and things. And there were stories about how it is that that all these various critters acquired the characteristics they had. And so Grandfather Frog would tell stories about, why the squirrel ate nuts and why and all those things. There are probably 20 of them, and I got them for presents for birthdays and Christmases. I loved the Felix Salt and Bambi's Children kind of thing. I gradually moved into things. There were a series of biographies and histories called the landmark books, and they would take chunks of American history. And I'm sure now anyone would look at them and say, well, that was simplistic. But I loved doing that kind of thing. And I even got in, I got into junior league sort of science fiction during that time. And then, of course, I subscribed to Boys Life.
As all young boys did.
Absolutely, and memorized all the jokes. And when I got a little bit older, Mad Magazine, which was just a terrific experience, for a kid who grew up out in the sticks. It was great.
So what do you like to read now?
Well, I'm sort of ecumenical. I have to say, as an academic administrator, I spent my life reading nonfiction of the kind that most people would rather, put a bullet in their head than to spend all day doing that. And so I don't read as much serious nonfiction as I did professionally. But I always have 3 or 4 books going. I started Jill Lepore's These Truths about the history of the United States. And Phil and I were both reading it, but he finished it and I got bogged down about halfway. And so every a few weeks I go back and read another chapter. I've been reading John McPhee's late history of the world. I can't remember the exact title, which is about the geologic history of the country. I read Phil's book, which was lovely. And I have to tell you, the thing I put in between all of these things is modern romance. The world's a tough place right now. It's a really hard place to live psychologically. And good modern romance, it's about people and relationships and what their struggles are. And they come out with a happy ending. And I'm really eager to have happy endings right now, what with everything going on. So
well, and Haverford Township Free Library has a whole romance section in our romance room, which is the former vault of the library, our vault of the bank that we used to be. Our initial building was a bank building, and so the romance room is in the vault. So if people are looking for romances, that's the place to go.
They can lock themselves into the vault.
And the other note is that Phil Goldsmith, who did just write a book, we are going to be doing a program in October, having him interview. I'm blanking on his name, but that will be virtual as well. So thanks for the shout out. Are there books that you go back to over the course of your life that you read over and over?
Yes, I admit to being a person who likes to reread books. And I will tell you the set of 3 novels that are most consistent for me in that. And that's Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea trilogy. Now, she later on wrote another 3 books, but these 3 books are books which for me help remind me about what's important in life. They're sort of what a new agey person might say. They sort of center me. And I reread, these are short novels, 120 pages. And I probably reread them every 18 months or so, just to say, don't get so caught up in, the small parts of your life and, remind yourself what's important, what our responsibilities are to one another and to the world. But there are plenty of other novels I've read a bunch of times just because I'm a sucker for good writing. I'm a particular sucker for good dialogue. And so finding novels that do that for me are critical.
So other than reading, do you have any other hobbies?
I do. I used to be a singer, but I don't do that anymore. I had a body surfing incident about 5 years ago, and so my voice isn't what it used to be. I sang barbershop in a quartet for about 15 years, and that was a lot of fun. I'm a low-level woodworker. I don't build anything complicated. I don't have the patience for fine woodworking. So desks, bookshelves, tables, I've added to our house, friends' houses, and it's just sort of fun to get in the shop and, draw things out and figure them and put them together and finish them and say, good, I have something useful to do.
Have all the good tools, I bet.
Oh, yes.
All the good tools.
Yes. Every project.
Toys.
Yes. Every project is an excuse for a good tool.
For another tool.
I have become a yard and garden person more or less out of necessity. I'm not one of those people who hovers over seed manuals and looks at everything. But, this is an area where if there's 3 square feet of ground and you don't look at it for 2 months, there'll be 17 kinds of weeds, 3 noxious vines, and a little tree growing there. And so you have to sort of keep on it. And we live in this house and we live in this yard a lot. So,
yes.
So
are you a flower person or a vegetable person? Or
I'm a flower person. I tried vegetables a few times, but they were really annoying. And the amount of produce I got for the investment in time in my was simply not worth it. And so, yes, I'm a flower person.
A
I'm a
flower
landscaper.
person.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you, of course, nobody's traveling a whole lot these days, but are there places that you like, places you'd like to travel? And do you have anything on a bucket list that you have not yet seen?
We're mostly domestic travelers. I mean, we spent 6 months in England and visited around Europe, and we went later and we were in France and Netherlands. We were in Egypt for a couple of weeks, and they were good experiences. But we actually prefer to be in the United States. Victoria, my wife, is an American historian. We have plenty of things we want to see. We have friends distributed all over. We lived on the West Coast, the Midwest, and now here. We still visit the West Coast a couple of times a year to see friends and family who still live there. And we enjoy hiking. We will go someplace with our daughter's family and spend a week, hiking the trails, mostly north of here. So yes, we are when we can, places we can drive, and when we can't, we're folks who hop in a plane.
At least before the pandemic.
At least, yes, we have not been on a plane for some time now.
I think are not yet ready to do that, but
no,
someday.
My sister and husband live in the state of Washington, and I was able to visit them just before the virus got worse. And we Skype with them every week or two, but still, I'd love to go back there and spend time. And we still have friends in Los Angeles, San Diego, and the San Francisco Bay Area. And I mean, one of my bucket list things would be is to climb in the car, make our way across country, stopping to look at every local county history museum and natural history, every park that's got something really nifty to see, and end up on the West Coast, and then slowly make our way either up or down the coast, visiting friends. And I mean, if we took 6 or 8 weeks to do that, that would be wonderful. I don't know if I can sit in the car that long anymore, but still, it would be a great thing to do.
Well, I'm ready for you to pack me in your suitcase. So it sounds like a wonderful trip. So, I don't know if you be able to answer this, but if you could live in any book universe, what would it be and why?
So I have to say, I'm a little bit of a slut in the what world would you live in? I like historical novels for the reason of what would it be like to be in that environment, particularly if I could still know what I know now and be in those environments. And it's also, I spent 12, 15 years where one of my main genres was science fiction. And one of the things about science fiction is a good science. I'm not into space cowboys and stuff like that. I mean, serious science fiction is the assumptions about how the world works and what the relations are between people and between the people and the environment and stuff like that. Whole sets of different rules, which suggest a whole different set of motivations and values. And I liked being in that different consciousness. I like not being in my normal world at all. And it's one of the main draws of science fiction is to put yourself there. But I can't say that there's any single spot. I like dabbling. I like visiting all these different worlds. And sometimes I'll get into an author and read, 3 or 4 or 5 books from that author because I'm familiar now with that world and I want to be in it a little while longer before I move on to some other world. But that's a good author does that for you, really helps you be in that atmosphere. It's a great thing about books.
So what advice would you give to someone who wants to be a librarian?
Yes. It's so my advice would go in 2 categories. One piece of advice is, the more fundamental is, in any kind of work you do, any kind of thing you do, There are more fun parts, more fulfilling parts, more parts where you wake up in the morning and say, oh, goody, I get to do this, as opposed to other parts where, okay, I've got to slog my way through this today.
Right. It's work.
And, and the way you get that is by whatever you're doing at the time, you have to really do it well, because that's your record. When the good slot opens, you need to be able to say, see what I've done? Now you know I can really do this nifty thing that I really want to do, and I'll do it really well. So one thing is for everybody who's going to do it, any kind of thing, but libraries in particular, you really have to do what you're doing well, because that's your entree to the next thing. The other thing is, a lot of times people get into library, at least in my experience, because they really love a certain field. They're in literature or history or music, and they think it would be really great to be a librarian and to take my expertise to help people make their way through it and understand it. But rarely are libraries that specific anymore. Anybody who works in a library does a lot of different things. And even if if you're an historian, okay, you might be doing social science, or if you're in English, you might be doing broadly, humanities and stuff. But in addition to that content, I know people who are librarians who are more technologically sophisticated than a lot of people who are technology people, whose technology interests are very narrow. Librarians have to understand a lot. They have to understand about databases and all the different methods of searching depending upon the database. They have to understand network, and they have to be able to teach people how to use computers and e-readers and tablets, and they have and what they have to teach is not just that specific thing, but when you're sitting in front of a computer learning to do something, how do you learn that material? Librarians are teachers in a really fundamental way. At circulation, at reference, at anywhere. So what I would say to people, do you understand the breadth of the life you will live as a librarian? And how do you think you can go about preparing yourself for librarianship so that you can really do it well? Because it's not an easy job. I mean, you're not putting widgets in something and screwing it in. I mean, this is one of the things where you have to be thinking on your feet all the time, and you can't just be into yourself. You're working with the citizens and the patrons in your territory. So it's a complicated thing. It's fulfilling, but you have to be prepared for it being much more than it looks like on the surface.
I would say, as a librarian, I would say yes to all of that.
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, it's very fulfilling, but it's, and I get people that say, don't you just sit around and read books all day? And I'm like, no. In fact,
when you go home, that's probably not what you're going to be doing.
No, I don't sit on the clock and read books. But you do get that environment of books, which is wonderful.
No, we underpay librarians. I mean, it's a busy, complicated job, and it can take a lot out of one to do, but we don't pay teachers very well either. I mean, there's a whole series of these things which are essential to the life of a country and a society, and librarians and libraries are a huge chunk of that.
My last question is, what do you like serving the patrons in this community?
Yeah. Well, I have to go back to of making things work. So our library is unusual in our county in the extent of the services it provides, and that not just from the number of people who visit our library, not just from the circulation numbers, but also the materials we have, which are borrowed by other libraries in the area, and we have it's a really, if you go on the library's website, the breadth of electronic databases for research materials that serve the community, business activities, educational activities, recreational activities, it's really enormous. So for me, who don't interact with library patrons in a service kind of way, my service area is the library and the librarians. It is helping to provide all those resources so you can see the library and the community thrive. There's good data that people, particularly families, when they're evaluating whether or not they want to move somewhere, they evaluate, well, what is the library like? And what the library is like is, yes, is it inviting? Yes, are there things for my kids? Yes, do they have bring? But it's also what resources they have available in order to move their lives forward. People come in to need to know about something at various times in their lives, and our library provides what they need to know a lot in a disparate set of different topics that they may need to know about. So helping make the library work so that those services are available to the community, that's the thing which I like the most. I also like the other trustees. It's really, it's fun to work with them to do
that
these.
That helps to like the people that you're spending your volunteer hours with. So that's great.
Yes, when I worked in college and university, I did meetings for a living for a long time, and these meetings with the trustees and with the staff of the library have been great.
Great, yeah. Well, Jim, thank you so much. It's just so exciting to hear all about your background and again, we really appreciate your service to the library as a Board of Trustee member. So that's it for Lunchtime with the Librarian. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you, Mary. It's good to be here.